Nobody does fall better than Whole Foods Market. The Spice Up Autumn event is happening now. Save on animal welfare certified beef top sirloin steak, perfect with gravy for a comforting meal. Find savings on organic Honeycrisp apples and organic pears. Then visit the bakery department for their limited time pumpkin butter chai cake. And while you can, level up your fridge with fall wine, beers, and ciders. Spice Up Autumn at Whole Foods Market. Terms apply. Must be 21 plus. Please drink responsibly.
Welcome back to Mediocre Alaskan Podcast. I'm here with Geoff and Jessica Jans. You came to Ketchikan via Idaho, and before that you were running a lodge in Girdwood, and now you own a hydroponic farm in Ketchikan. So can you talk about, well, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How did you get here? How did this happen?
Yeah, well, my wife, Jess, here grew up in Ketchikan, and so this is where we met, and is a special place for us, and of course for her. And we decided sometime in the middle of the pandemic that we wanted to go a different route with how we lived our life, and we wanted to be back here in Southeast Alaska and in Ketchikan. And so we thought hard about what re-entry to Ketchikan would be like. I have been in tourism, in the business of tourism, for my entire career. So while Ketchikan has lots of opportunities for tourism and tourism business, we just looked at, of course, with the state of life in the pandemic, as tourism wasn't feeling as comfortable a place to have, the remaining timeline of our career. It just felt a lot more of a vulnerable industry than we were used to it feeling like. And so we thought hard about what we could do here to, support ourselves. And that conversation was really interesting, and it led to us wanting to look at, like anyone who wants to start a small business, once we decided, well, it's something we wanted to do. We actually always thought it would be in the tourism industry, but then you look at what's a problem that you want to solve in the community that you want to be in, and food security and food sustainability became really interesting to us. And so we went ahead and dove our mind into that project, or thinking about how that would work, and that led us to this concept. And so,
how does that conversation start? You want to solve a problem, and hey, let's get into this, rather than, we want to. It just seems like an interesting change and an interesting thing to tackle. Do you have a background in botany or ecology or anything like that, or is it just, this is a cool thing, let's do it?
Yeah, no background in botany. That would have been helpful, but no. I think when I look back at our past and the choices that we've made, we kind of like challenges, and we like working together. And Geoff is quite tech savvy, and come to find out, you need to be pretty tech minded to operate one of these things. So it's not surprising given Geoff's character, and he's always looking towards the future, it seems. So knowing Geoff, it makes sense that he would be open-minded to this. I have no idea why I was open-minded to it. I'm a little bit less of a risk taker, I would say, but apparently not as much as I think.
Was it a huge risk? Because it seems like this is where there's a lot of technology in this way, but there is definitely that jump of, we're going to make a run at this thing. This is going to be something that we're really going to pursue, versus we know there's a market for it. So
right.
Like, was that a long conversation? Was it like a 2-3 months of thinking about it, or was it like, yeah, okay?
Oh, okay. So we were in Idaho, like you said, and the housing market was pretty hot there, and we owned a house, and we were nervous that given COVID and things going on, we thought, well, we should sell our house now while it's hot, and make an investment, take that money and make an investment in our future. And it wasn't a very long conversation. It was shorter than you would think, but also you had mentioned before that we ran a remote lodge, and so we knew that we work well together, and we like being together, and starting a small business, like Geoff said, was we wanted to do that, and being back in Ketchikan, we just could not figure out how to be back in Ketchikan, and I just kept thinking, well, it doesn't make sense. We're in tourism. We should be able to find a way to be back there, and we were surprised no one was doing this concept yet. So we knew, okay, if we're going to be the first to do this, we have to do it now. And so all of that just made sense to don't think too hard, just go for it.
But I think you said you're not a risk taker by nature, but we are a perfect example of I wouldn't call it imposter syndrome, but we have taken on some big challenges in life. Probably the biggest one for us as a couple and in our career path was to go from just a couple of ski bums and bunnies in Girdwood, Alaska, who I had experience here in the guiding industry in Ketchikan, and was working as a ski patroller at Alaska Resort. But there was a company in Girdwood that was building this very large eco-lodge project in Kenai Fjords National Park, and they were doing it in a way that we thought was very special, and in the way that it created a low impact footprint, was gentle on the land, and allowed people to experience a truly amazing, very biodiverse ecosystem in that park that normally wouldn't have access to it. And so we signed up to be and applied and were accepted to be the first and opening managers of this brand new lodge project. It was a 3-hour boat ride from Seward into the Gulf of Alaska, and very, very aggressively Alaska terrain and climate, and all those systems that were built to sustain that place were things that we had to learn and learn quickly, and we had to manage a staff of 20, and we could have 60 people at the lodge, and they'd be coming and going daily. It was a big project to jump into, and while it was one of the hard two things, and not feel like that isn't there for us because we don't have the right education or background, or it hasn't always been part of the plan. And I think in this day and age, and as we're learning, and I think many people are learning around the world right now, is you are going to need to be dynamic and creative with how you find your way through this world. And this to us felt like, in some ways, it's one of the more simple things that we've had to do in our life, because it is just the two of us. We're able to have this machine in our backyard, and we're in a place where there's a community that knows us and supports us. All of those are ingredients to be successful, and we just had to know that we could tackle some of the more technical aspects of it, and we can get into that as this conversation develops.
Mm-hmm. So how did you decide on scale? Like you said, Jess, Ketchikan's a small community, but very diverse. Like it's a hardworking fishing town. It's a tourism town. It's also a very artsy town. Like it's got pretty much everything. So how did you decide on the scale to meet that need?
Well, actually, with one farm, that is not meeting demand. So two will be better. I feel like we could. The sky's the limit a little bit as far as scaling up, but it says we just have to decide as a family how much we want to invest, financially and of our time. with 2 farms, we're probably going to need to hire some help. 3 farms for sure. So yeah, we're dreamers a little bit too. I mean, Geoff has talked about all kinds of things that we could be growing. Right now we're sticking to lettuce and leafy greens and herbs, but now that we're in this world of hydroponic farming, we're diving a little deeper into the possibilities of growing other things.
And I think maybe to answer that question in a different way is, like anyone, and this wasn't just a cool, let's do this, and not having done our homework. There was market research done and, a business plan written, and we quickly identified that this, if the system performed as advertised, we would be in a situation where we'd have a viable business, and part of that is what you're getting at is what is this market in Ketchikan? Well, for one thing, everybody eats, right? What's interesting in Ketchikan, and as we're noticing, is that lettuce, leafy greens, the things that suffer the worst on the long, difficult journey from their origins in Mexico or a Central Valley of California, have, for many people, been something they've just avoided because the quality wasn't there. And so it is not part of the staple mainstream Alaskan diet. But what's cool is it could be, because I think it's by and large universally enjoyed as a complement to a meal or as a main focus of a meal if it's delicious and fresh and done well. But there was a study done in 2016 by the McDowell Corporation, or the McDowell Group, which is a market research group, and Spruce Roots, which is a community development organization in Juneau that sponsors a lot of research and data to try to grow sustainable business opportunities and sustainability in general in Southeast Alaska. And they, there's a lot of great information in that report about the state of food and imported produce in Ketchikan, or in Southeast Alaska, which has about 75,000 people. And the conclusion was that, of the 2 million pounds of lettuce imported into Alaska annually, that 11% was wasted on the barge or on the store shelves, which is a significant amount of weight that isn't making it to market. And also, it did a pretty good job of determining what the per capita consumption of lettuce is in Southeast Alaska. So we did that with those numbers and the forecasted production capabilities of this machine. We felt that even with one of these farms, we could only meet 2.5% of the demand for lettuce in Ketchikan. Well, that gives you a lot of confidence that you'll be able to find a market to dive into. How big it is to be determined. And I think what we're realizing is that per capita consumption is taken into the fact that lettuce isn't part of people's diets necessarily here. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be or couldn't be.
Right.
And so we're excited about introducing this type of food that's everyone's familiar with, but haven't had it in this way.
Yeah. So I lived in Central Valley of California, and one of the big things was just the agricultural runoff, pesticides, all that sort of stuff, which it's such an unbelievably fertile land. The soil is great because so much of it used to be underwater. You like a lot of great organic material. So a hydroponic farm does not use soil. So it's very space efficient, and you use primarily water. So can you talk a little bit about the difference between soil and water? How does the plant get its nutrients, and how much, I don't want to say manipulation, but making sure you get the right water recipe to make the growing positive for the plants?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to give you that perspective of space saving and soil versus our system of hydroponics anyway, is that container is at least equivalent to a 2-acre soil farm in its annual production capacity. And that's because we can produce and harvest every week. We have 7 generations of plants in there at any given time. And a soil farm will have maybe 3 or 4 harvest opportunities in the typical North American growing season. So to your point on water as a nutrient delivery system, essentially that's what soil is as well. It's a nutrient delivery system, as well as a medium with which to expand roots and pull up those nutrients. And you need water to, bond to the nutrients that are in soil to then be uptaken by the roots that are drinking that water. Hydroponics just kind of takes the soil out of it and uses water as that nutrient delivery system. And in many cases is just using small plugs, which can be a variety of mediums from rock wool, but ours are made from peat moss, and they're pressed in a way that creates a really nice structure for a seed to germinate and expand its roots into. But then those roots are also attaching to a wicking strip in our system that is where the water is traveling through on a prescribed timer and cycle to feed the plants. So then the recipe for hydroponics is going to depend a lot on what you're growing, and in a laboratory setting, in a university setting where you're not running a business and money isn't, meeting costs isn't as much of an issue. There's many, many, many things you can grow hydroponically. And there are many things that you can also grow hydroponically in a greenhouse and take advantage of natural light and climate. And so much of the lettuce that we all consume in this country is hydroponically grown in large raft systems on a pond of water in a greenhouse. And these are very, very large scale facilities.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
And then we look at what we're doing, which is part of a smaller but growing industry of agriculture, which is controlled environment agriculture, where we take it completely indoors and use LED lights and to take and climate control, essentially air conditioning, to create that growing environment. Then you are, as you said, really have the opportunity to manipulate the plants to do exactly what you want to do. We're adding CO2 to the air as well. For lettuce and leafy greens, you really go back to the research. There are many scientists in the field of botany and horticulture that have developed great recipes for growing lettuce and leafy greens in the type of environment that we're growing in. And so we want to basically look at those to determine how we want to feed our plants. And then you can certainly, you buy your nutrients or your fertilizer with certain proportions of the main, what are called macronutrients, which is nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and then a little bit less important, but still very important, is calcium and magnesium. And then there's many trace minerals as well. And you want to be essentially in our system kind of injecting those on a parts per million basis to create a very precise recipe for growing the type of plant you want to grow. And for lettuce and leafy greens, you're just dealing with plants that are staying in a vegetative state. So it's a short growing cycle. You only really need one nutrient recipe. There's no pollination happening, and you're quick to harvest. And that's why in this controlled environment, agricultural and vertical farming world, lettuce and leafy greens and herbs have been what have really dominated the space. But there's a lot of really interesting opportunities on the horizon to expand beyond that.
It looks super simple because if you're just using water to grow stuff, Ketchikan gets a ton of rain. And the farm just looks like a shipping container. But obviously it's way more complex than that. So how much, do you use city water? Do you use rainwater? And then what other technology is used in that shipping container?
Yeah, we do use the city water here. But it goes through a pretty intense filtration system. And one of the things that it completely eliminates is the chloramine, which is important. And one of the great things about these units, Ketchikan does get a ton of rain and water's not in short supply. What does our unit use? 10 gallons a day?
5 gallons a day is what is advertised, and we are seeing them quite a bit less in our climate. Now, a desert climate may use a little bit more, but...
So that's a big selling point for these units. They're often found in very dry climates. So the small amount of water that they do need is great. The water's recirculated, and then, of course, the plants are producing moisture, and it's a closed system, so really efficient.
And then how does that impact, because one of the reasons why people use pesticides and whatnot is because you have bugs and then fungus, and is that stuff completely eliminated by being in that shipping container? I'll just keep using that term for all the people like me who are English background.
It's what it is.
Fungus, disease, bugs, what have you completely eliminated that?
The advantage of doing what we're doing is those are much smaller concerns than growing outdoors, where that bugs and disease are a part of the situation that's hard to mitigate. So we can take a lot of steps to mitigate that, in the way that we ourselves move around in the farm. Honestly, how often we keep the door open to let anything inside. But really, there are still potential for pests and insects to come and get into the system. And spores from mold and fungus exist everywhere in our life. They're in your home. They're unavoidable. They're just in the air, and given the opportunity to grow, they will. So managing the climate is really important. And if you were to have high humidity, high moisture content in the air, you would give those types of things more opportunity to grow and impact the system. So it's a risk, but the benefit of what we're doing is it's greatly diminished risk. And so we do not use pesticides. We do not use and we don't need to anything to mitigate those issues, and so therefore it's not a part of the food that we're growing, and it's not something that the customers or consumers of our product have to worry about on their food.
So in that shipping container, you have variable, or the plants are at different stages. You've got about how many plants and how many per stage. You have some that have just germinated, some that are a couple weeks old, then they get moved into the vertical slats, I guess.
Yeah.
how's that cycle work?
Yeah, we have 7 generations of plants growing at one time. So we plant once a week currently, and they spend 3 weeks in what is essentially called a seedling area in our farm. And then as they mature at 21 days, we transplant them to the main cultivation area, which were those vertical panels that you saw with the wicking strips. And the amount of plants we grow will depend on how much time we want them to be on the cultivation area. So currently, with essentially 28 days in that cultivation area, we plant about 45 heads of lettuce per panel, and that totals up per week to be about 800 heads of lettuce. And then the remaining panels, we're growing a variety of leafy greens that are really, really great in a salad. And these would be kale, mizuna, mustard greens, tatsoi, arugula. And those are continuous harvest crops, so we can manicure and cut them as they grow. And we like to harvest them at a nice tender baby leaf. And then they'll keep producing for us week in and week out for a number of times. Whereas the lettuce was a kind of a single harvest crop.
Mm-hmm. So your harvest, you said you harvest on Thursdays. Is that right? Or is that when people pick them up? And Tuesdays. Okay. And I'm sure it's been pretty crazy. You went with a pretty small, manageable scale to start with, but I'm sure the Ketchikan people have caught on and are being good customers. Is that right?
Yeah. I think when planning to do this, we were not expecting to be. I thought, the science of growing plants, that'll be the most enjoyable part for us, and we'll be able to work together and bunch of other things. But I did not expect to be so fulfilled by the act of feeding people. And I think that's just been just wonderful. So people have been very receptive. And when we deliver lettuce, you would think there was like a cash prize at the bottom of the bag or something, but it's just lettuce. It's still just lettuce and greens, but it's just fun to see people's enthusiasm and introducing this concept to people and just having them think about food in a different way has been just wonderful.
So how has that impacted the scale from this point? You're already looking at expanding. You're going to go double? Are you tripling? What's going on here?
We're going double, and we always knew that we would start with 1 container and then move on to 2 eventually. We jumped in a little sooner than we expected with the second one, but we just, for various reasons, thought it was the right time. So yeah, the demand is there, and people are hungry for salad, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, we did have to put our chips on the table essentially back. So we received this container, our first one in May, and we harvested our first harvest in July, but we had put down a deposit on a second container in early June and sought financing for that container in June, very simply because we were still considered a startup until we had sold our first head of lettuce. And in the world of business, a startup is looked at with rose-colored lenses, and you can do all sorts of fun things like have a great business plan and financial forecasts that banks, and in particular where we sought financing was the Small Business Association SBA loan, the ability to finance the second farm was only possible as a startup. The second we sell a product, we're now just a business, and they want to see the books, and they want to see 2 years of great tax returns. Well, any startup, especially one that's leveraged themselves as we have to get this started, is going to look terrible on the books, and therefore not something anyone can lend money to. So we quickly realized if we didn't make a decision now, before we even had a proof of concept or a head of lettuce to sell, to grow and have that opportunity to grow to meet what we saw was going to be the demand we had hoped for, we weren't going to. We were headed towards a lending black hole, and we needed to have it. And so we actually financed the second container, and we almost twice as much as that cost just to have working capital for the next 2 years, and cash flow. And cash crunches are one of the big challenges that any small business is going to have. And because we're using a system that has the potential for mechanical failure that would result in a loss of crops, we wanted to make sure we weren't playing it so close to the edge from a cash standpoint that we'd have this great concept, this great equipment to realize our goals, and then have something get in the way that would take it all down. So we've done that, and we feel very good about that decision. We now have some debt to manage with the way that we run our business, but and we were able to self-finance the first container and bring that up here. So from the bank's perspective, here we had put all this of our own personal, we staked our own personal investment into this, and had shown that we could get it on site and get it up and running. So they're certainly more comfortable with this, us taking on a second one for that reason too.
So where do these come from? Then how do you get it set up? Because that's a pretty big shipping container. Like, it's not something you're attaching to the back of your truck. You do have a pretty nice truck. That's not getting that thing up there. So where do you order it from? How do you get it here? How long does it take? And then how do you get it set in the spot?
Yeah, it's the company that builds these is Freight Farms. They are based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and they produce and have been producing these types of machines since 2013. And there's been many iterations of them. They seem to come out with kind of major model upgrades every 3 or 4 years, and then they're always kind of evolving as people get into their machines and utilize them in different and unique ways. They are all over the world. It's one of the largest decentralized networks of agricultural equipment there is. There's folks that we chat with that are in Tasmania that are experiencing the same, challenges and opportunities that we are, as well as, folks that have 10 of them in London. And so that's one of the really cool parts about the system, is the community of people that are using them for various different reasons. And they are produced in the United States and shipped out from there. And it took a journey of 5-6 days to ship it from Boston to Seattle. And then it jumped on a barge from Seattle and is now just parked down the street here. We're ready to go.
And Geoff's really good at logistics. I mean, Freight Farms will do manage the logistics of shipping it from Boston to wherever you are, but they charge a nice fee for that. And Geoff here loves a challenge, and so he's done all of that for both of these farms. And then, the crane operator here, Brian, is awesome, and he knows our whole routine. He's done it once, and so he'll do it again. And now we have a third little container out there that we're using. We'll put it in the middle of the two farms and use it for storage and processing and all that. So it's just a container village that we're building.
A farm of farms, right?
Yeah.
So you have got to have some tedious jobs, like the fun when you're making the delivery and it's great, but what's the most tedious part of this thing?
Okay, so that's a great question. It's still farming. It is manual labor. It's this, given the vertical nature, it's a lot of picking up these panels, and when they're heavy with lettuce and the wicking strips are heavy with water, you have to be pretty tough. We're building shoulder muscles, but then it's 800 heads a week of just the lettuce. So we are taking all of that off the panels. Yeah, soon to be double. So I think that's been the for us the biggest for me the biggest challenge is trying to figure out the best schedule of events for the week. What things to group together on a certain day. Do you harvest and transplant the same day? Do you harvest and seed the same day? Because there's all these tasks that take a good chunk of time, and they are tedious, a lot of them, so you don't want to put too much strain on your body in one day. So yeah, we're still fine-tuning all of that, but yeah, farming's farming no matter how you do it.
Yeah, we're still optimizing, and it's funny, you know, a little insight into our lives, but Jess will all of a sudden walk into the room and say, I cracked the code, and we'll be like, hurrah, what did you do? And she tells us, okay, and we'll give it a try. And maybe she did, or it was, you know, back to the drawing board. So we try a lot of different ways to skin this cat.
I love that part of it. It's like, okay, how can I rearrange our calendar and figure this out? But I have not cracked the code officially. Still working on it. Pretty close, and the customer doesn't know that, you know. Well, now they know. But
has it been difficult to, like they say, don't necessarily go into business with your best friends because you might not be best friends, and obviously as a married couple, like obviously there's been some conflict, but were there elements that you knew were in place where, hey, we can do this together because we have the type of relationship where we can run a business and still, you know, not take it out on poor Porter?
Yeah. Yeah. So when Porter was about 8 months old, I stopped working and was home with him. And so a big part of this was getting me back into the workforce, and how does that look? And working together. Yeah. Well, I mean, we're good at it. No one's perfect at that, but we kind of have a good little routine down. Podcasts during the day. I mean, it is monotonous work. And so we put on good music, good podcasts, and some days we can't stop talking to each other, and some days it's quiet and we just get the job done. But it's nice knowing that if something were to happen to Geoff, I could still do this. I need to hire some really good help, but I could still do this, or if something happened to me, Geoff could still do this. So if we just wanted a business that looked sustainable long-term, and it's been a great re-entry for me into work. It's great not going to an office. I had office jobs before, so it's fun having a greenhouse office.
Yeah. What has it been? Almost 8 years since we worked together.
So we're different.
Yeah, we definitely have different skill sets that complement each other well, but, you know, like anyone is, we also look at each other sometimes like, how do you go through life?
Geoff is so good at just managing chaos. That's what he's done professionally. Oh, that is not me. And I have to have everything written down, organized. If it's not written down, it just doesn't exist. And Geoff has never written a thing down in his life. So yeah, thankfully those are skill sets that, where he's lacking, I'm kind of, overcompensating.
So what does a typical day look like? Your farm chores?
Yeah, it depends on the day. But Mondays we're like tomorrow, we'll get in there and start, working through some of the harvest, I guess. We won't start processing anything until Tuesday.
We take all the lettuce off the walls, but we keep all the roots on. So we have big Tupperware bins, and all those heads go in there, and then they go into a walk. We have a little trailer out there that Geoff converted to a fridge, and so we put all of that in there. So, and then we deep clean things. So there's a lot of, algae is a big potential problem in these systems. We haven't had algae issues, which is great, but we just have to keep up on it, constantly wiping surfaces down and keeping that in check.
Yeah, for some reason, none of the Alaska freight farm people that we've talked to deal with algae in the way that it can find itself in other systems in other parts of the country. So there's something geographically, I just attribute it to good, clean water that, it doesn't and cold water at its source, versus somewhere in Florida that's got a lot warmer water, a lot more potential for algae to be in the system to begin with.
So then the rest of the week, we are cutting greens. That takes, a handful of hours to do that. And then we have to actually cut the lettuce from the root. And then we're bagging everything, and then we deliver to restaurants. That's another thing we do each week. And then we deliver to the customer. And I think my favorite day of the week is when we are blending the lettuce and it's all cut and we're just fluffing gorgeous lettuce and putting it in bags. It's rewarding because it's a lot of hard work. And we bag it the same day that we deliver. And that's Wednesdays are a great day.
Yeah, so Monday through Wednesday is kind of farm heavy, and then Thursday, Friday, a little maintenance in the farm and other business related tasks, and that's the extent of it right now. We'll see what happens with farm 2.
We were talking about flavor profiles when we were in there, and typically when I think of flavor profiles, I think of like wine tasting or something. So what have you found about, certain leaves, certain plants that are pretty interesting in different flavors, and what has worked, what hasn't? There was where you gave us something that tasted like wasabi, which is very interesting. And then the mustard plant, to taste a leaf that is spicy or hot just doesn't seem, it just seems very strange. So what are some of the things that you've learned, some of the things that you like about those aspects of it?
Yeah, well, we were really excited when we first started. So we planted a little bit of everything. I mean, Geoff even had some peppers growing in there. I laugh about that now, but we were really excited. Now we've learned that not everything grows perfectly in there. Some crops are just difficult to harvest. The roots are just a little bit more intense than others. Some plants don't like as much light as the lettuce or other things that we're growing. We love certain crops that maybe still are difficult, but we still love the flavor, so we're just going to grow them. And the customers really enjoy it. So we have something in there right now, the Ethiopian kale. It's technically a mustard, but we brought that down to the New York Cafe, and we were tasting garlic, and the chef was like, "Oh, I taste a potato." And so it's just interesting that people are getting different flavor profiles from the same plant. But yeah, I love the variety. I think that is really important. While the leafy greens are a little bit more difficult to manage, just as far as crop yields, we're just kind of guessing how much we're going to grow on a panel of kale, for example. Whereas lettuce, okay, I'm going to do 50 heads. It's going to be roughly this much. But to me, it's important that we do provide some interesting greens to Ketchikan, and I enjoy eating them, so I just want to keep growing them.
Yeah, I think beyond flavor too, what's great about hyper-local production and bringing this living plant essentially, into someone's kitchen and on their plate within 12 to 24 hours of cutting it is, this idea of plant as medicine too, and the amount of antioxidants and vitamins and minerals that exist in these plants that you're just not going to find in a plant that was harvested before maturity 2 weeks prior, loaded in a container full of nitrogen to try to preserve its fresh, that it's, that it looks fresh. The amount of depletion over that time in transit of those wonderful properties of a plant very real. So that what you're eating from those kind of imported lettuce and leafy greens is more just great fiber, essentially, but missing a lot of the elements that you get from eating something out of your own garden, or at least something that was grown close to home. And so
Nobody does fall better than Whole Foods Market. The Spice Up Autumn event is happening now. Save on animal welfare certified beef top sirloin steak, perfect with gravy for a comforting meal. Find savings on organic Honeycrisp apples and organic pears. Then visit the bakery department for their limited time pumpkin butter chai cake. And while you can, level up your fridge with fall wine, beers, and ciders. Spice Up Autumn at Whole Foods Market. Terms apply. Must be 21 plus. Please drink responsibly.
And the variety of antioxidants and minerals that exist have been fun to learn about.
I think people are really conscious of that when it comes to fish. You have the fish, and the closer it is to being when it was alive, the better it is. But when people think of other foods, they might not think about the degradation of it and how it was alive and how it's slowly degrading. It doesn't taste nearly as fresh, not as good, not as nutritious. But yeah, that's pretty. It's pretty cool to be able to provide that to people.
Yeah, and what a compliment to Alaska's bounty these plants can be. Just we have access to all this great protein, and very rarely do we kind of marry it on the plate with lettuce and leafy greens, but we find that it is just really tremendously delicious to just from a texture on your tongue to be incorporating just a leaf of lettuce that typically you would think is kind of flat and two-dimensional, but now has all of this almost three-dimensional characteristics to it, and crunch and flavor that is adding to the meal, instead of just something like, well, I better eat my vegetables and I'm gonna put this on the plate because it's good for me, but I need to drown it in sauce or something like that. I mean, we often eat our greens now with just the salt, a little pepper, and some olive oil, and let the greens actually be the complex flavor profile that we enjoy, instead of drowning it in something that with more vinegar and that's going to mask the flavor of the lettuce.
What are other possibilities for hydroponic farming? Can you do fruits, vegetables, anything that you would want to grow ordinarily, or is it just better lend itself to leafy greens?
So hydroponics, I think it's hydroponics being that you can do hydroponics in greenhouses and outdoors or more outdoor settings is already really successfully growing. I mean, most of the tomatoes that we consume, particularly the smaller cherry type tomatoes, are grown hydroponically around the world, and there's 3 or 4 big companies that produce them. So it's really, I think, right now the question to ask, as it applies to a place like Ketchikan, where the climate doesn't lend well to greenhouses, in Alaska in general, is what can controlled environment agriculture, this completely indoor agricultural process, do? Again, this is kind of at the university level in a lot of respects for having the time and grant money and sophistication to really push the boundaries of what can be grown. But then what we find is that the industry is sort of taking cues from that, and now maybe even moving beyond that. The amount of investment in vertical farming and controlled environment agriculture grows each year, and it's billions of dollars. And in fact, Driscoll's, which is a major berry producer, has partnered with a vertical farming company that the name escapes me, but they are producing a huge vertical farming platform or base of operations in Wyoming, not far from Laramie, if not in that area, maybe Cheyenne, but in that kind of southeast area. And so what you're seeing is, and to answer your question, is berries are certainly kind of considered maybe more on the up and coming side of things. as well as tomatoes. And the challenges with any of these more complex varieties is pollination. And the idea too that you are going to, that nutrient recipe that we talked about earlier, you're going to move from just having a vegetative nutrient recipe to more of a blooming, flowering recipe to give the plant what it needs during that stage of its life cycle. So, what's it like? Are you releasing bees into your container farm or your indoor warehouse? What are the benefits and consequences of doing that? As well as, if you're not going to do that, are you hand brushing the flowers to create a pollination? Are you dealing with a plant that has one flower that's male and one flower that's female, and you need to know which is which to then help pollinate them? Or like a tomato, which both sexes essentially are in the same flower, maybe a little easier. So, there's so much that nature does naturally that we don't think about that you have to consider if you're going to bring this stuff indoors. The biggest game changer for the industry has been LED light efficiency and improvement to bring costs down, to be more competitive with sunlight. And I think we'll continue to see that be the driver of the ability to essentially have things more time in the oven, more time to let these plants that have more complicated life cycles grow. The industry has always benefited and will continue to benefit from the production of cannabis. This is the cash crop that people grow indoors. It's the most manipulated plant on the planet. And everything that we've learned about growing food inside and agriculture has been essentially riding on the coattails of where people have learned in cannabis cultivation, and has created also the technology where it maybe wouldn't have existed before, because you have such a profitable margin when you grow that plant. It then drives that research. So I think this type of growing can credit a lot to that industry as well. There is a company that has taken the concept of Japanese ever-bearing strawberries, which don't ship or export well outside of Japan, but are known to be the most delicious strawberries on the planet. And in fact, the Ketchikan exchange student from Japan, or a teacher from Japan, Shogo, we were just chatting yesterday, and he can name 3 or 4 berries in Japan that he loves. Well, somebody from Japan who studied in Berkeley has gone ahead and learned how to grow these strawberries in an indoor environment, has brought it to Manhattan, and is now in the process of, after a year of research, selling strawberries grown in downtown Manhattan. And they're featured on Michelin 3.5-star restaurants in Manhattan, and 8 strawberries are selling for $50 right now. These are incredible strawberries. They're quite a luxury item, and different than, this idea of agriculture is like, how do we sustainably feed ourselves? But, these costs will drop, and it's exciting to see the boundaries of what's possible being pushed. And it's always going to be sort of this maybe high-end luxury concept that needs to start to then make its way down and make it more accessible to everybody. They sound like they're moving to LA, anywhere where there's these big high-end markets. And that's where the real environmental and sustainable benefits of this type of agriculture exist, are in either places like Alaska, where where we're far away from the production, so we can bring production here and solve problems of this huge supply chain challenge that we have to get food up here, or into an urban area where we just have a lot of consumption and a lot of people. And again, there's just a lot of economies and efficiencies that exist if you can grow it right in the same neighborhood as someone who's consuming
right. I brought along, didn't bring her along, but my wife, you have the science background. Do you have any questions about any of that make me sound smarter?
No, I mean, I think you asked some good questions. I was just kind of wondering, listening to you talk, if you had some kind of mentor, or if you had a farm that you kind of looked at what they were doing to give you ideas, or if there's another group in Alaska that you maybe chatted with to get some advice, or if you guys just totally jumped in on your own.
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the great benefits of going with a company like Freight Farms is that it's a huge community, global community that we can learn from. But Alaska being a unique environment, and Alaskans like talking to other Alaskans, right? And so there is a couple up in Kodiak. Their name of their farm is Brightbox Farms, and they, being on an island in Alaska, we thought they would be good to reach out to, and so we've developed Geoff specifically has developed a good relationship with them, and learned from some of the challenges that they've had. And another farm, Kale and Thyme, I believe is their name, and they are out of Cordova. And then Geoff's actually mentored some people. I mean, I guess we could call it that. I just talked with some folks up in Haines that are thinking about buying a freight farm, and talked about some of the potential challenges that they might have there. The cost of power is a big one. Ketchikan actually has really, our power costs are pretty low compared to Cordova. Yeah. So yeah, it's nice before reaching out to these other individuals. We've never met another container farmer before, and we still I've never met a freight farmer in person, but Zoom calls have been nice, and phone calls, and it's just nice to have that camaraderie and not feel completely alone, for sure.
Yeah, I would say Freight Farms does a great job of laying a basic foundation with which you can walk into their platform essentially and be successful and be productive. But like any system, there's kind of like that baseline entry level amount of knowledge that you need that they'll provide, and then you can, through your own curiosity, really expand upon it. And when you look at where do you kind of learn this stuff, what's cool is Freight Farms also has, a chief director of research and development that's out there taking the new ideas that are coming into this type of growing and applying it to the system, and that research then can be broadcast to all of us as to this is something to try or not, as well as, because it's controlled environment, it's like the first thing, it's essentially a laboratory out there, and I can go and read, and I'll often find some research that maybe I don't even have access to, but I'll email the professor in Bologna, Italy, and say, I'd like to have your research on LED lighting strategies and techniques. And all of a sudden I get this data dump of 10 different research papers that this professor and PhD in controlled environment agriculture has created. I can then read that paper, and I can read the methodology, and I can actually, to some extent, create the conditions of which the research was done in my own system, and have that benefit of quickly skipping ahead to the conclusion. Well, what was the conclusion? Okay, that conclusion sounds like something that would, improve the taste or quality or yield of what we're growing. I'll read the methodology, and I can make an adjustment. And things that we've done is, we can have one half of the farm growing with one lighting regiment and the other half growing with the different. And we can put the same generation of lettuce on there and take measurements of lettuce from the top, middle, and bottom of the panel every week, and watch how they may grow differently from each other. Are they, one maybe is much bigger, but as a result of adding more red light to create that yield, it has less of the red color that the blue light gives it. And so all that to be said is we have a lot of opportunity here to take research from a PhD level on the cultivation of these types of plants and apply it to this system, because we like them can control all of the elements of the growing conditions of the plants, and that's just there's just so much exciting stuff on the horizon. In fact, we're looking at nanobubbles as this new and interesting way to really overwhelmingly increase the dissolved oxygen levels of the nutrient water in the farm by using cavitation to split water into its more basic elements of hydrogen and oxygen. And the oxygen will then actually sink and stay in the water. Well, currently we're using air stones to add basically air that's in the farm, which has much less oxygen in it, bubble it into the water. And it helps with dissolved oxygen. Temperature is another big thing with dissolved oxygen. The colder your water is, the more it can hold. But this concept of nanobubbles has huge potential to improve our yields, because that oxygen is really part of that delivery mechanism of nutrients to the roots. And the more nutrients to the roots, the more your plant can feed, and the bigger it grows, or the faster it grows. And so we will continue to see innovations that will be able to take the basic platform that we have and improve its capabilities to produce food, which is exciting.
That's awesome. This has been really, really informative. Love it. It's great, great stuff that you have here. Thanks for what you're providing here in Ketchikan. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Oh, well, no, we've enjoyed it. I'm glad I participated. I wasn't expecting to jump on. No, thank you. Thanks for being interested. And we're just excited to be here and doing what we're doing.
Yeah. I think I would just add that what I think hopefully that we can provide as an example is that you don't have to be an expert to have an impact potentially on a system or a way of doing things that have, the way things have always been done. You can look at a problem and try to solve it, and hopefully what I would guess is, as I look around Ketchikan, is there are other opportunities to solve problems around here, or utilize what resources we have in ways that have really positive benefits, not only for our community, but for the wider world. And so those of us that are living here and enjoying this place and trying to find new ways to not only improve our community but make a living, that I would just say that keep those ideas out there and keep them coming, because Alaska's had a tough few years as we kind of transition out of an oil and gas economy and out of maybe our traditional economic platforms that have brought us to this point. And I think we want to see innovation coming to help make these communities rich and sustainable places to live and work. And seeing that what technology exists out there to make that more possible is important. So whatever part we play in helping demonstrate that is possible and real is what keeps us going.
Cool. So where can people find you, follow you? Do you have an Instagram, email, website, all that stuff?
Yeah, we do. We are KetchikanEverGreens.com. From our website there, you can be linked to our online store, which you can purchase greens from us, weekly, essentially. We're kind of in a situation right now where we have way more demand than we can keep up with. So we put our stuff for sale up on Thursdays at 2 p.m. and we recommend that you visit our store that evening because it often does sell out. Yeah.
Thursdays at 2.
And then we're on Instagram and Facebook at KTN Ever Greens to search for us there, or enjoy us at your local restaurants, which would be Just Dandy and the New York Cafe in downtown Ketchikan.
Yeah, and we just added one more restaurant this week, the 55 Degrees North too. So
great. Well, thank you very much for being on here and what you're doing for Ketchikan.
Thank you.